Kamala Harris is certainly coming, but everyone is kind of expecting Taylor Swift and or Beyonce to show up before she takes the stage.
Do we think that's going to happen? Because, I mean, we've had some massive stars. It wouldn't be completely surprising if there was a bit of a curveball. Do you think we could see Beyonce or Taylor Swift even?
Taylor Swift's plane is at the airport in Chicago.
That's confirmed. Taylor Swift's plane is at the airport?
Yep.
Oh, my word. Well, that would be quite the moment, wouldn't it? Wow, if we have Taylor Swift, I think we might have to cross to that live as well, to be honest, if Taylor Swift starts playing. I mean, let's just actually touch on that very briefly, because it's interesting how you've had some really big-name celebrities speaking at the DNC this week. I mean, they had the Republicans as well, although I'm not sure Kid Rock and Dana White from the UFC is necessarily comparable with Oprah Winfrey and potentially Taylor Swift. But does that matter? Do celebrities have the power to swing votes?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I mean, Oprah herself is independent. She's not Democratic. She's one of the most popular and respected women in America. And when she speaks, tens of millions of women listen. And so I thought her appearance at the convention last night was really powerful. And for the same reason, people have been thinking that Michelle Obama would be the answer to Democrats' future this year. She was never interested in it. She really, I think, had a visceral dislike of politics, notwithstanding everything that she did and everything that her husband, of course, as president did. So, yes, these stars do have star power, and people fall into their orbit.
Is there a risk that if we do get an appearance from Beyonce, Taylor Swift this evening, it might overshadow Kamala Harris a bit, and it's meant to be her big night?
It is her big night, and they're there because it is her big night, and they're part of, if it happens, they would be part of the army of people, and the younger people especially, who did not want to vote for Joe Biden, but have come back in droves to Kamala Harris. So they would help build her. No, she is numero uno, and she will be. And what people want to hear from her is extremely important. She's going to tell her life story. She's going to talk about what she stands for. She's going to talk about how important this election is, her programs, and why she makes a difference and why the country cannot go back to Donald Trump. It's going to be quite a moment. It's reminiscent to me of when Obama ascended to presidency and the nomination at his convention, and going back to JFK too. These are powerful times for you can see it in the room. They haven't been this wound up really in a generation.
How much, Bruce, do you think she'll want to lean into the historic nature of her candidacy? If she were elected, of course, she'd be America's first female president. She'd be the first female president of colour. And yet there are people who think that maybe part of the reason Hillary Clinton lost in 2016 is that maybe a certain section of America wasn't ready for a female president. So to what extent will she want to make a point of that?
She'll want to do it, but not by saying it's time for a black woman to become president. If you look at the past three nights, there are several themes that have been distilled, that I've distilled from it, and it's what she's going to talk about. She's going to talk about freedom and democracy as important values. She is the politics of joy. She wants to talk about the politics of joy and not grievance, like Donald Trump. She's going to talk about values. She's going to her values. She's going to talk about character, his character, and she's going to say we're not going to go back. We're going to go forward. And finally, for Trump, I think the Democrats have finally landed on the weapon of choice to defeat him, and that's ridicule. And we've heard it for three nights, and I think she's going to ridicule him a bit in a couple of hours.
It feels a bit like there's a big battle going on between the Democrats and the Republicans to be the change candidate, because you could almost make an argument that each of them is the change candidate. Kamala Harris clearly never been president before. Donald Trump has. And yet the Republicans will say she's continuity Biden. She's been part of the Biden administration and that Donald Trump presents credible change. Is that the key battle over the coming months?
It's a very interesting point, James. And a good friend of mine, Alan Abramowitz, pollster out of Emory University in Atlanta, with Larry Sabato today, he's the Sabato Crystal Ball, had a study of this question. And he calls his poll, predictive poll, time for a change. And what it's found is if a president or a party standing for re-election after one term, they've won 7 out of 9 of the past elections. After 2 terms, that's when you want a time to change. In other words, what Biden has done and stood for, it still has a period of time to run. And if you think about it, after 2 terms of George W. Bush, you got Barack Obama. After 2 terms of Clinton, you got George W. Bush. So, no, I think it is ripe for Harris to build on Biden and continue the mission that they have started down.
How much policy do you think we'll hear from Kamala Harris tonight? Or I mean, you keep hearing people talk about it's about vibes. And why she's having this kind of political honeymoon is because there is just this energy and this sense that she is fresh and she is new. Do you think she can sustain herself on that alone, or do you think we will get some detailed policy?
You know, where Trump is really strongest is on the economy and inflation and on immigration. Those are two, the cost of living pressures, immensely important, and immigration, a very hot button issue. And 70% of the country believes it's going in the wrong direction. So that's where Trump can really exploit his strength. And she has to step up and respond to that. And it's why, even after all the enthusiasm and everything we've seen over the past month, she does not have this locked up. She's not even close to it. This is going to be a bitter fight to the very end, and it's going to be decided by a small margin. But she has to have credibility on what she's going to do on inflation and how people are facing up to cost of living in their households. And she's going to have a credible program, and she does, on immigration, and so that people feel protected, that their president is protecting and securing the country and its borders.
I mean, it's really interesting point you raised about the economy, because this is a quandary, I sense, for the Democrats, because, you know, they are proud of some of the Biden administration's economic record, the Inflation Reduction Act and some of the stimulus package. You know, they're very proud of, and they think that's contributed to, you know, pretty strong growth in the US over recent years. And yet most American voters don't really feel that much better off than they were 3 or 4 years ago. So how do you get the balance right between touting your economic achievements without sounding insensitive to people struggling?
Well, she says what she needs to say. She will say what she wants to do on prices of household items, medicines, things like that. But the fact is, in the 3 years since Biden and Harris were elected, inflation's up 20, 30% or more on things that people need day to day. And that's why the president owns the economy. People are very unhappy about it, and therefore it leads to low approval ratings. So, but I think she's going to need a lift from an outside force. And it looks like the Federal Reserve, and we'll hear from the chairman of the Fed in about within the next 18 hours on where the economy is going. I think there's going to be a cut in interest rates here in the United States, and I think that will provide a lift to Harris at a really crucial time.
Do you think, in essence, how the economy is doing in November will be the thing that decides the election?
Most elections are decided on the economy and how people feel about it. But with Trump, there are all these issues that get to the existential nature of the country and what his future is. I think what we've seen in the convention this week is people want to come together more. Okay, we have differences, but do we have to be at each other's throats? And I think they're looking for positive leadership. And I think, Trump has a ceiling. He has not lost any of his base to Kamala Harris after she has come into the race, but he has not gained any either. And her job is to regenerate the enthusiasm of Democratic voters from 2020 who didn't want to vote for Biden, have them come back, increase those margins a bit, and she can win on that basis. But that is why it's still uphill for her. It's going to be a very tough, a very exciting campaign. The next marker, James, is going to be the debate between Trump and Harris on September 10th. And that is going to be quite a night.
That will be quite a night, yeah. Just going back to our conversation about who may be a surprise guest at the DNC tonight. Might be Taylor Swift, might be Beyonce. Leaving aside the kind of musical act, could there be a surprise Republican? I mean, just to throw a couple of names at you, could we see George W. Bush, who's no fan of Trump, or could we see Mike Pence, the former vice president, who, of course, has fallen out badly with Trump and says he won't vote for him?
To my knowledge, George W. Bush has not issued a public statement saying don't vote for Trump. For Mike Pence, I think that would be a bridge too far. Mm-hmm. And he has ambitions for the future as well. His staff, though, as part of Republicans for Harris, addressed the convention last night, and she was very, very good. And there's a whole group, Zoom, the old technology, has now become the hot platform. And there are Zoom calls for the Harris campaign of tens and tens of thousands of people, 70,000 white dudes for Harris. So the Republicans, Harris is going after them, the Nikki Haley voters, the independent Republican women who don't want the government controlling their lives and their bodies. So there's room there, and they are absolutely going to exploit that, and we'll hear a lot about that tonight.
I find it really interesting how they've reclaimed the language of freedom, which is the kind of word that appeals to Republicans. But you're talking, when you get Tim Walz talking about, the government has no right to interfere in people's bedrooms or whatever, and we need to protect freedom. They've kind of subtly shifted some of the language around protecting democracy to protecting freedom. And I think that's quite clever, because I think that probably taps into concerns that Republicans have a bit better. Do you agree, Bruce?
Yeah, but the message there is, as Tim Walz says, it's none of your damn business.
Yeah.
And that's where freedom counters the fear of the right about the left, that the left wants to control government and get into your private life. Well, that's just boomeranged on them.